Hello everyone and welcome back to the Retro Recall. I hope you're doing awesome. Today we have a beautiful desktop PC on the bench that we're going to do some restoration to and see if we can get up and running. This is a system that I had featured in another video already, and it was just a general high-level overview. It wasn't really pointed at getting the system restored or up and running 100%. It was just to see if it would post. And the system did post. However, I didn't notice it, but a lot of people had commented, why didn't you press F1? Essentially bypassing the fact that it's stating you the battery was low. And for whatever reason, I didn't see that during the filming of that video. Well, today, that's what triggered this essentially, is someone just recently made a comment and said, hey, why didn't you press F1? And it made me go back in the collection and take it back out. And I figured, why not? Get the system back out on the bench, see what it's all about, see if we can get the system all restored, get it up and running. So you know what? We have lots to do. Let's get right to it. Here's our beautiful desktop PC on the bench. And quite frankly, I don't remember a lot about this computer. There's been quite a few videos between then and now. We're going to go over the system in detail, see what it's all about. So we do have a Digital Equipment Corporation is the brand of this system. And to be honest with you, I don't remember digital systems back in the day. Specifically when it came to, you know, these type of OEM systems. I always either custom built systems in this era or, you know, saw the standard ones like Dell and Acer and Hewlett Packard. But when you see digital, I mean, it was really nice to see that. I can't remember if this was donated to me or if this was something that I found in e-waste, but either way is really cool to have in the collection. So we have a Digital Venturis FX 5133, as I mentioned. We have our power button over here, and you can see that it's quite yellowed in the front. The plastics are quite yellowed, and we'll talk about the condition of the chassis in a moment. I had really considered retrobrighting this. However, the plastics are quite brittle in this system. I just noticed some creaking and what have you going on. And, you know, with retrobrighting, you have to be kind of aware of that stuff. Just, you know, if you're going to take the risk, because you are working with the plastics and, you know, you can potentially make them more brittle depending on how you're doing it. So over here, we do have a power LED and a hard disk activity LED along with what looks like a reset button. It looks like we have some ventilation in the front here for an additional fan. Not sure. We're going to take a look at again when we look inside. We also have a 3.5-inch floppy, two 5.25-inch bays, one of which is populated with looks like an optical drive. And I'm just going to lean this up a little bit so we can see down here. Looks like we have two ports, which would be serviceable for what looks like a headset and microphone jacks. But unfortunately, I don't see them populated, but they are knockouts, so you can, you know, punch them out and go from there. But on the top of the case, as well as the sides and everything, it looks to be in really great shape. I mean, outside of the yellowing plastics that we have this metal surface up top, and I don't know if this is rust or what have you. We're going to do some restoration on this just to see if we can get it up and, you know, looking really good. But I don't see any real deep gouges or dents or anything like that that you would see in an older computer system. So it's nice to see that this was at least taken care of. And whether it was thrown to e-waste or if it was donated or what have you, it was definitely looked after in some form, even through the disposal process. And here's the back of the digital system. We have our power supply and the fan for the power supply in this area. Looks like we have some additional area here. I don't know if it's for ventilation. We have a couple, looks like vertical expansion card capability that goes in this area. We also have, it looks like a sound card and a modem that are populated already in the system. We also have the LPT port, two PS2 ports, one denoting a mouse and a keyboard, built-on graphics, and we have two serial ports here as well, COM1 and COM2. They are labeled in the back. And we have a digital model A73WW is the model of this computer. And here we are with our bird's eye view into this beautiful desktop. And I do love the desktop configuration when it comes to the layout and what have you. Yes, it's a little more cumbersome to work on. And of course, this kind of design promotes proprietary configurations just because of the layout and how the manufacturers made everything kind of work together, versus that, say, a desktop tower that you could work on, a little more room to work on and what have you, and a little more standard form factors. Okay, so let's go over the system. I'm just gonna get my screwdriver and we're gonna take out this sound card. And there's just tiny little screws over in this little side. Just gonna take them out one by one and we'll remove it out. So we do have an ISA card, and it looks like to be Aztec is written on the chipset. WaveRider 32. So it's a WaveRider 32 card that's inside this computer. I'm going to have to look that up or post something on the screen during editing as to what this card is. But I'm going to leave, obviously, when I do the restorations, I tend to leave the hardware that came with the computer in the computer. Okay, this other one here looks like just a standard modem. Let's take that out as well. We need to remove all these components regardless because we're going to be doing the actual cleanup. Let's remove this. And this looks like a PCI card. It just says WS-5614PSL modem. It doesn't give us any more information. I usually like to see if there's any sort of model information in terms of like it's a US robotics or, kind of generic card, but unfortunately I'm not seeing this. Again, I'll post that on the screen during editing as well. Okay, let's take out some cables. So we have our floppy cable that's connected and our floppy power that's connected. We're just going to remove those. And then we have this kind of card edge going along here with a couple of connectors on this riser card. And let's take that off nice and easily, slowly, because we don't want any damage to the pins. It looks like it can handle 2 floppies. We have the one, of course, for 3.5. And then, of course, our 5.25 could connect to that as well if we had one populated. And there's our 3.5-inch floppy disk. And to get that out, there's just a couple screws in the front. And again, as you're seeing, it's, you have to think a little differently when it comes to desktop PCs, only because of the configuration and the way they're laid out and how everything's kind of tighter than a normal system would be. And it comes with, it looks like a drive kind of cage caddy that holds it into the chassis. I'm going to be removing that, of course, to do some cleanup on the drive itself. Just make sure everything's looking good inside. Okay, we'll take that apart. And we also have what looks like a fan sort of tunnel here. Let's see if we can get this removed. Looks like just a couple of, there we are. So this is a couple little hooks there. But you can see how dirty that is inside, because again, all the years of dirt being funneled through this area, obviously to promote cooling for the CPU itself. So we do have our motherboard here, and it does look like our heatsink. This is passive cooling. There's no active cooling outside of what was kind of in this area for this fan that's mounted on this side. I think this is the Pentium 166, which is, of course, what the front is kind of denoting. I'm going to remove that processor. It is quite dirty in this area. And to do that, it's just a little lever down here that you pull off, and you can pull out the heatsink from the CPU. And you can see that thermal paste is quite dry. So good news on our part to do that. We're going to have to get this all kind of cleaned up anyway, and we'll get all those parts cleaned up as we go. It is showing a socket 7, so it does give you a little range of CPUs, assuming that this board does support the various voltages. Over here, it looks like what would be a VRM connector. Yeah, sure enough, that's what I believe it is. This just looks like a dummy port that kind of protects those pins, and we're going to leave that in place for now just to, again, keep the pins kind of safe. Here we have a Coast module. This is a cache on a stick, hence the term Coast. I'm going to pull it out here very carefully. And see, the reason I say very carefully is because these systems have the plastic, there we are. These systems have the plastic edges here, not the metal ones that you see on different types of desktops, even using SIM memory. But you want to be very careful because pulling these out can sometimes snap these little brackets off, making these really difficult to make contact inside the socket when you put in the chip itself. So here we are, we have a Coast module. It says SRAM module version 1.2. Not exactly sure what this is in terms of cache memory. Usually there were 256 kilobytes, but we'll see that as we go in the system. So I'm gonna pull that out for now. And the same thing with the memory, because I do want to get this system all cleaned up. And in order to do that, I am going to have to take this out. I don't want to do this because you got to be very careful in getting these removed. And it's just about taking your time doing it. So I'm going to take all these out right now. Okay, and we're removing our last memory module from the sockets. They all look really good. Everything looks like everything's intact, nothing broken. Over the years, these, like I said, become brittle and break, but it seems to be pretty good at this stage. Now, I mean, if you're really good at soldering and you do have a couple of these from old motherboards, you could theoretically replace them. I've seen them done online as well. You just want to be mindful of it though, because it does take quite a bit of work to do that. There we are. And this opens up to the side, you can see, and just kind of swings out. So that kind of design, it protects the case, obviously. It protects the motherboard and provides some structural integrity for the cover that goes on over that. So I'm going to put that aside in a different area just to have it where we need to go. Okay, so here's our motherboards. One of the things that I notice about this motherboard is very similar to that IBM system that I had, the PL 300, I believe, or 300 PL. It did have a similar setup where it had kind of like these little eject, see that? Little eject mechanisms here. Quite a neat design. And it allows you to slide just the motherboard straight out of the chassis. And you gotta be very careful. There's some grounding plates here, you know, like IO shields and things that are attached to the side. Be mindful as you're sliding out just not to bend anything. And there is our motherboard. Just some observations while we're here before we go down the cleaning process. So it looks like we have a Trio 64V S3 video card that's built into the motherboard. And of course we do have, it looks like, a couple of expansion VRAM slots here to allow you to put some chips in there to expand the memory. I actually have a couple of those, I believe. But also, you know, if you don't want to use the built-on graphics, you could obviously use one of the PCI slots that are in the back here to allow you to expand it to, say, like a Voodoo card, for example, or something along those lines, or definitely better video card than what is currently on board. Okay, and we have our SIS chipset, or 5512 chipset. It says SIS 95 written on the actual chip. One thing I'm noticing here, we do have the one capacitor in this area. It doesn't look bad. It doesn't look like there's any issues with the capacitor. However, if I'm looking at the coin cell battery, I am seeing what I think is oxidation on the battery itself. So we're going to take that out immediately. We're not going to leave that in the system any longer. And this is something that obviously the system in our last video was kind of giving us some grief about, saying, hey, you know, it doesn't have any charge left and all that. So we're just going to pull this out here. And yeah, that's definitely leaking. You can see on the camera the battery's been leaking, and we're going to have to neutralize that and hope to heck we'll do the area around here as well, and just hope to heck that it doesn't cause any damage to the surrounding traces. I do see a little bit on the motherboard here as well, so that would have leaked a little bit outside of the socket. So we'll get that all kind of neutralized, and we'll do that as part of the cleaning process itself. It's really nice. It's written on the silk screen of the motherboard. On the PCB, we do have the on-off, all the jumper settings for the jumpers on the motherboard. So nice to have that as a reference. But of course, I think on the DeRetroWeb, they do have this motherboard on there. Okay, I think it's looking pretty good. We went through our I/O already. We talked about all the different chips. And so I'm going to put this aside for now, and we're going to continue on. Okay, and we have our riser card sitting here all by its lonesome. So I'm going to pull off these little wires. These little wires just provide power to the card itself. Let's pull that off. And it seems like there's two screws that are connected to the riser card holding it in place. We'll just remove those. I'm keeping this all separate in my mat just to be sure that we're using the right screws when we go to put everything back together. It's actually interesting. This one was quite loose on that. Okay, we have that, and we'll take it out. Again, just being very delicate with all the components, make sure nothing's still attached. And there is our riser card from DEC, or Digital Equipment. And I mean, it's in excellent condition. We have our primary IDE or secondary IDE, so it does have the two IDE ports. We also have the two ISA, along with the two PCI, and then of course we have our motherboard connector here that it would slide into. And then we also have, it says floppy connector, and then we have our LEDs and power to the card and everything going through the side here. So, this is absolutely great. And again, just being very careful when you remove all these things, because you don't want to have to go and worry about anything as you're going through this. Next thing we have to do is start working on getting the hard disk out and the optical drive and what have you. So let's continue on. Okay, and for our optical drive, it doesn't give us much information on the top. It just manufactured in 1999. It looks like just a generic optical drive, but hey, we'll still clean it up. We'll get it all looking good. Okay, that kind of frees up everything here. I like how everything's written on this to kind of a reference, showing what the CPU is, what the jumpers do, and it's the same thing that was written on the silk screen on the motherboard. And you can see here that it shows the CPU core frequencies. So depending on if you want to change jumpers, and as I mentioned earlier, being a socket 7, it may allow you to change those frequencies within reason for different processors. Here we also have our CMOS reset as well, which is nice. Okay, the next thing is to remove the hard disk from the computer. And I see a couple screws that are going on the side and on this side, but I think this is all held in by that power supply. So it looks like the hard disk is mounted on the power supply itself. So on the back, there's about 4 screws I'm just going to remove, and I believe that'll allow us to get into, or at least get access to, removing this hard disk from the power supply. All right, and you can see it's a whole kind of unit, and proprietary is old heck. So it's kind of one of those things that, once it goes, it's harder to replace. You just kind of have to go on the hunt. And if you can't find one, then it's a matter of getting a power supply corrected. Now, I don't have a lot of experience with power supplies. I don't do a lot of work on the inside of them, but I do know a few people that do. So in the event that there's any issues with this, after I clean it all out, I can get them to look at it. Okay, let's remove that. And I'm just going to remove it as is. I'm not going to remove anything else. We're going to do the cleanup on the system and get it all ready in the components, and we'll make that part of that process. But it is showing here, it says Windows 95, Windows for Workgroups 3.1, and DOS 6.22. It says dual FIS Apollo pre-FIS drive. So if you know what that stands for or that means, please let me know down in the comments. But over here we have a Quantum, it looks like 3.5 series. This is a Fireball. Yep, Quantum Fireball. And it's showing a 2.1 gigabyte hard disk. So really nice to have that. And I'm going to, of course, clean it up and put it back in the system. I mean, there's different things you can do, of course. We talked about this before on this channel, and I know I'm going to get comments on it because I do on every single video. I like spinning rust. I like the platter hard disks, and I'm going to put it back in if I can and continue to use it until it's no longer serviceable. The alternative is you can utilize an IDE to CF card or IDE to SSD. There's various SD card options as well from IDE, and you can do all those different adapters. You can order them online fairly cheaply and replace these with something which would be considered more reliable. But I would argue, in 30 years that these are still going, that they're working pretty good and will continue working. And I like that feel of the retro feel when you're utilizing real hardware. And just the sounds and all that stuff just comes from this. It just adds to the experience. All right, let's remove that now and take that to the side. Let's get the bench all reoriented here, and we're going to start working on cleaning up all the components. So I'm going to work on getting all of these kind of cleaned up. I mean, you've seen this a few times in the video, so I'm going to go through this in the editing. But essentially, I'm going to utilize all the anti-static brushes because I've gotten a lot of comments of what I'm using on the channel in terms of cleaning up the components. So I just use anti-static ESD, electric static discharge, that stands for brushes for doing a lot of the heavy work to the boards. Plus I have an ESD vacuum as well, which is completely grounded, allowing no sort of discharge or damage to the components. I've done a lot of this cleaning on the channel, and you've seen that. I also have what's a toothbrush for getting really in there in those areas, specifically when we're going to work on that battery leakage and get that kind of neutralized. And we also have some Q-tips, I call them, cotton swabs. But essentially, I utilize this to be able to work on any area that if you're soldering, or in this case, we're going to be removing that battery acid from the motherboard. And we do have some vinegar in this container. The vinegar acts as an immobilizer to the battery acid that came out. So it will neutralize that completely. And then I utilize 99% alcohol, isopropyl alcohol, to neutralize and clean off the vinegar. So it's kind of like a process. You don't want the vinegar to stay on the PCB too long. It's just not natural to keep that on there. And I also have 70% in a spray form. I would prefer if it was 90% because it dissipates faster, but we utilize this and we'll just refill it with the other stuff. But essentially you take this and you spray it on the boards, on the PCBs, etc., on the components, and just I find it makes for a very nice cleaning tool. And of course we have other tools that we'll utilize through the cleaning process. Well, I've talked enough. There's lots to cover here, lots to do, lots to clean. So I'm going to go on right now. Let's go. Okay, I think that's a good place to pause for a moment. It's been almost an hour in real time going through all the components, getting everything kind of cleaned up. And in terms of the power supply, you probably saw during that, during the fast forward there, that I did end up taking it all apart and cleaning the inside of the power supply, just because there was so much dirt and grime in that PSU that I had to clean it up and yeah, get the bigger dust bunnies out of there that the compressor couldn't get out through the holes. So I was able to get all that cleaned out, and while I was in there I did take a look, and I don't see any signs of burn marks, or the capacitors look great. I mean those are just visual signs of other things, but like I said, we did have this system up and running before, so taking a visual inspection of the power supply as well, everything was looking good in there. So in terms of the motherboard, here we are. So I did give it a rough cleaning using the brush as well as the vacuum cleaner, and you can see that it's looking way better already just by doing that. So I'm going to do is continue cleaning off the processor here. I want to get that thermal paste off of the CPU, because we're going to be applying new stuff to the CPU here as well, just to make sure that we are good. Okay, I'm going to swap this around because I want us to take a look at that coin cell. And I'll be honest with you, I have not had any coin cell batteries leak like that before. So that's interesting. I literally have not had that happen, where we had, basically battery leakage from the coin cell. These are really reliable. So I'm not sure if it was a bad cell. Who makes this? Sanyo. I'm not sure if this is a bad cell to begin with, but definitely something to be mindful of. So I'm going to dispose of that, put that through the recycling. And now we're going to work on getting this neutralized, that battery acid, because it doesn't stop there. Once it gets out, it starts to do some funky stuff. So we want to get that all cleaned up here. Okay, so we have a slightly zoomed in view of this, just because I want to show everyone what we're doing. So we have good old vinegar here, and it's quite potent. And, there's different people online will do different things when it comes to taking this off. Some won't even do it at all, but like to neutralize the battery acid, but some will just use IPA. I like to use the vinegar. And what you do is just kind of plop it on here and just watch it. It starts to fizzle a little bit because what it's doing is neutralizing that battery acid in that area. And yeah, it really does a good job at cleaning out that green from the socket here, or anywhere there would have been battery leakage. So we're going to continue to do that here. Pretty straightforward. And I'm just going to put it in the surrounding area as well, because I want to make sure that if any battery leakage happened, that we don't have the risk of any additional damage to the board. I don't think it was. I think we caught it in time. It takes a while for some of these to activate and do the damage, but yeah, okay. Seems to be pretty good there now. It just took that green right up, and it was fizzling a little bit in there, or I should say fizzing, sizzling, whatever word you want to use. But essentially what it is it's neutralizing that battery acid. Okay, now that that's done, the next thing we're going to do is put the cover back on the vinegar. We don't want that spilling everywhere. And we're going to focus some IPA in this area. And for this, I am using the 99% IPA. I do want it full concentration as much as I can, just to make sure that we now do the opposite and neutralize that vinegar. Because the vinegar itself will continue to operate, and we don't want that. We want the IPA to do a nice cleanup of that vinegar that we had there. Okay, so the same thing applies. I'm just spraying the 70% IPA all over the board. There's many different versions of this. I mean, I've seen people put these in dishwashers. I've seen people dump them in big tubs of water. You know, I don't do that. This is just me. I don't, not that, you know, if your method works fine, go ahead. I mean, I'm not stopping you from doing it. And I've seen some of the products and they continue to work. They just dry them off and let them sit for a few days. Make sure, you know, any of the chips that are inserted are taken out of the board, just to be absolutely sure there's no water lingering underneath. And, you know, they're happy and good to go. And and I've seen the videos, and I'm just in absolute awe when I watch someone put a motherboard in a dishwasher, just because of all the pressures. And even if you put it on China mode or whatever the delicate mode is, I don't know. It's just not my cup of tea. I just like to give it a nice wipe down, get all the nooks and crannies, you know, just make sure it's all kind of cleaned up. And I find the IPA does a really nice job, and the brushes and all that stuff. All right, we have our new battery. Nothing like a fresh coin cell to put in the system. It's one thing, you know, especially someone like myself who has so many of these different computer systems that from all different ages and eras, I don't get a chance to get to all of them that are donated or, you know, come into my possession to stop this sort of damage if there's any. Now, in this particular case, we did do a review of this system in the past, and I was aware of it, but I had totally forgotten about it. But thank goodness there's no damage to the motherboard as a result of waiting. Okay, now we're going to start populating the good old RAM slots. In order to do that, I definitely want to take some contact cleaner, and that's all this is. So, I mean, Deoxit is the brand name, and what it does is just essentially allow the cleaning of the contacts, and it just allows this to make good contact to the motherboard. Okay, so the motherboard is now populated with memory, and we have our COAST module, and we also have our coin cell all populated back on the motherboard. And it's just looking absolutely wonderful. I love how clean it is, and it just feels really good to work with now. Okay, I'm going to get the chassis all ready and get that all cleaned up on this, and we're going to start reassembling this computer. Let's go. And here we are back, and everything is looking really good. Everything's put back together. I have the CPU heatsink put back on with the thermal paste, with the ductwork all completed. I put the cards back in. I believe I have all the wiring correct. It's one of those things that, I mean, it just felt right when everything went back in, but it's one of those things you kind of have to test out when you turn back on. Everything's put back together. It looks really, really, really good. Feels really good as well. I had some trouble getting the motherboard slid back in because when I had put the riser card in, I had done that second. So I had to remove the floppy again to be able to access that corner. And when I did, I noticed the bottom of the riser card wasn't, there's like kind of like a little groove in the bottom of the chassis for that to slide into to keep the bottom from kicking out. And of course it was out a little too far. So when I slid the motherboard in, it wasn't closing all the way. So I was able to get that all situated. Again, you know that by not forcing anything, because if you're forcing it, you're going to break it. So you just kind of go, well, you know, just kind of feel it out. And I did that, and I realized that that was kicked out on the bottom. A very easy thing to miss. But yeah, I mean, just look at this beautiful Pentium system with everything reinstalled. I'm going to leave the cover off for now, because what we want to do is kind of get this all situated and do a test to see if we can get this computer booted up, specifically with that new coin cell, and see if we can get the settings saved and bypass that issue. That, again, what triggered me even doing this video today is the comment that how come you just didn't hit F1 to continue on to see what was on the drive. And for whatever reason, I didn't see it. I mean, shame on me, but we're going to do that all today, and that's why I did the restoration on this system. One other thing I'll call out is I don't have a CD audio cable that goes from the card to the optical drive. I do have them in other systems, but I'd like to leave them in the other systems. I don't want to keep on moving them from system to system, because when I do other setups, I don't want to worry about not having that. So I'm going to order a bunch of them just to have for these sort of builds. And yeah, I just want to call that out because I've had comments about that before, and I just want to make sure that everyone is aware that I'm aware it's not there. Okay, I'm going to get the bench all set up and get to see if the system will post. And here we are back on the bench all set up. We have our digital computer all freshly cleaned and reassembled. Our Sun monitor that you saw in one of the Thrift Finds video, and I've used it in 1 or 2 videos as well. Plus we have our keyboard and mouse. Let's hope I did everything correctly, power it up, and that power supply holds out. So here we go. Okay, so we have power. And we have post. Yes, 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 we have post. This is awesome. Okay, let's take a look here. So we have our Phoenix BIOS showing 1985-1996. And there's our Venturis, our model number FX5133 version 1.07 by Digital Equipment Corporation. This is absolutely great. We have 640K of system memory plus 48 megabytes of RAM. And it says, yeah, so let's just go into F2 to enter our setup and take a peek at what we have going on. It says the checksum is invalid, default will be loaded, because remember we replaced that battery in here, so everything has to be readjusted. So let's get the system date and time set up correctly. Our disk drive is set to A, 1.44 megabyte, and I don't think it is detecting, let's see if it auto detects it. It did, there we go. So it is detecting the hard disk, which is absolutely beautiful. We'll get out of that screen, so we have that. And then let's look at the other, let's see here, it is detecting as a CD-ROM drive. That's awesome. And our secondary port, we don't have anything connected to that. But if we did, we could have another hard disk, another optical drive, things like that. Video system is EGA VGA, because we do have the built-in video graphics. Our memory and cache, let's take a look at here. So we do have those both enabled. Now this is where you would go in if you had some older games that you really wanted to play, that you go in and turn off the cache, but right now we're going to leave everything in there. And of course you can go in and change this out if you want to. Okay, under boot options, we do have the summary screens enabled, setup prompt is enabled, quiet boot is disabled, floppy check is enabled, and our boot from drive A only is disabled. We're keeping that on for now until we see what happens. And we do see the 640K of system memory plus our extended memory of the 48 megabytes installed. It's technically 47, but it's 48. And under advanced, it says, hey, if you do anything in here, you can potentially cause your system to malfunction. Integrated peripherals, we do have our mouse port, parallel port. This just basically gives you all your IRQs, your resources. You see your diskette controllers enabled, obviously, because it's on, and gives you some different options to change in there if needed. Advanced chipsets, so you can go in here and change all different settings that if you want, if you need to configure the system further. PCI devices, the same idea. You can go in here and change all the different settings if you're running into some problems. Under our security, we're going to keep all that kind of off for now. Power management says it's enabled. Yeah, I'm just going to turn that off because my experience with power management has never been a good time. Under our boot, we have diskette drive, hard disk drive, then our CD-ROM drive. I'm just going to move that up because I do want the diskette drive to be first, and I want our CD-ROM drive to be second, and then we'll go save and exit. Let's hit continue and see if this actually boots into anything. Okay, so it's doing its RAM test. It sees the 256K of our Coast module now, which is great. It says testing hard disk drives. I'm going to pause that for a second so you can see everything. So we do have our Pentium 133 installed, our coprocessors installed. We have our resources and our BIOS date of 1996. Shows all of our memory, our COM port resources, and our hard disk. So basically all of our configuration. Starting Windows 95, everybody. This is absolutely great. The system is truly booting. And remember, we couldn't do it before because, well, probably because of me. But how fitting to make a second video specifically dedicated to this computer and get this operating system up and running. Now let's see what we have installed on this computer. And here we are all booted back up to the desktop, and you know, just the sound of that hard drive clicking away is absolutely awesome. It's always great to see these old systems and see what type of software and hardware. I mean, we already know the hardware because we've gone through it, but the software installed at that time, it's like a kind of like a time capsule in history. Okay, I'm gonna click on start and yeah, just to see what we have installed in the computer. So under accessories, just your typical Windows 95 stuff that I'm seeing here. And nothing too fancy. We have it under communications. We have our net meeting, internet connection wizard, multimedia, all these great things that we have installed on the operating system as part of Windows 95. Obviously, this individual had an Epson printer and Game Shark for Game Boy. So, you know, whether it was going to program that. Heroes of Might and Magic, it seems that it's been installed. Ink monitor for the printer. We have SimCity 2000. Yeah, all these good things. We have Microsoft Office installed. And we have Printmaster Gold, so you can do all the publishing suite for all the different types of banners and cards and things like that. Softkey CD guide, so different, I don't know if different games, I guess, are installed. Under our startup, we have the things that pop up there. Learning company, well, I don't have much there. And yeah, I mean, outside of that, I mean, it's looking pretty good, and it seems to be working pretty well. We have our CD-ROM drive, so it just says a TAPI CD-ROM. It's not giving me much information on this CD-ROM drive, so I don't know exactly know what it is. I'd venture to guess it's probably like a 24 speed or something like that, or 16 speed. It seems that it is newer than the system in my eyes, 1999, so it would have been an upgrade. So then we have our hard disk, of course, and our floppy disk. Display adapters, we have our S3 Trio 64V+, and we have our modem. There we go. It's a Motorola SM56 PCI speaker phone modem. Now, it is saying that for whatever reason, the monitor is disabled, the laptop panel display. That's what it's detecting this as, is a laptop display panel of 1024 by 768. And then our network adapters, we don't have a network card in the system, but really cool about these older systems is throwing a network card in here makes all the world of difference when you're trying to do any sort of network file transfers. Of course, our sound card, there we go. We have our Aztec 2320 plug-and-play audio device. And the reason I just didn't go and wipe this right away, this computer, is because I really wanted to see what we had for drivers installed, because that really helps me understand what drivers are installed. So when I go to restore the system in terms of an operating system, that we have all this good to go. But yeah, I am absolutely ecstatic that we have this system up and running. I mean, you can see we have 48 megabytes of memory. 88% free in our terms of our system resources. So I just want to call out one thing here. I did wipe the profile and I do have a new clean profile installed. So all the historical information has been removed and I do have a clean setup for the retro recall on this computer. The other thing you may notice is that the optical drive I've had to change out because I tried to open it up and it wouldn't open. This is the drive that was installed in the computer and I flipped it around and parts fell out of it. So I have no idea what's wrong with this. I am going to work on it. I mean, it looks to be in decent shape, so I have no idea what would have happened to it. Long story short, we have the new optical drive installed, just an LG 52-speed CD-ROM drive. That's all we need in the computer. It's more than what we need, and it is working just fine.
Any squad leaders, this freak.
And here we are at the end of the restoration journey of this beautiful digital Venturis FX 5133 desktop computer. Pentium 133, 48 megabytes of memory, dedicated sound card, onboard graphics, 2.1 gigabyte hard disk, running just fine. And thank you so much to the person who commented down below in the comments of one of my older videos that said, why didn't you just hit F1? Like, what happens? And, you know, it just really inspired me to take this out of storage and get this system back and restored and keep it out of the e-waste pile. And I'm very happy we did that because of that leaky battery. Goodness knows what would have happened if we continued to let it sit there and potentially cause some damage to the PCB and the motherboard itself. Very happy. So thank you so much for doing that and commenting. And yeah, I mean, the system works very well. You saw me running Doom and you saw me running Hover and heck, even Quake 2 worked. Yeah, it struggled a bit, it had to be low resolution, but it was definitely playable. I think a dedicated graphics card would make a world of difference in that area. And quite frankly, I love the nostalgia this system brings back. It sounds just great with that hard disk spinning away in the desktop form factor. And I'm so happy to see this up and running on the channel and can say that this system gets to live another day. That said, if you liked today's video, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button. Makes a world of difference, helps the channel grow, tells the YouTube algorithm that you are really liking what you're seeing. Please leave a comment down below. Did you own a digital computer? What systems, what hardware were you using running Windows 95 back in the day? Please leave a comment down below. Let me know. I love the interaction on the channel. I respond to absolutely every comment. We'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.